Good morning, everyone, and thanks for taking the time to join us for our Zeld webinar series, Creating Amazing User Experiences for Customers with the Right User Experience and User Interface Design. My name is Helen, and I will be your moderator for today's webinar. Creating an amazing user experience is one of the most powerful ways of engaging your customer. As the dynamics of digital business is changing every day, you have to be agile, alert, smart, and adapt to latest changes. Today's topic shows you how and why user experience is crucial to growing your brand. Today's speaker is Logan Braithwaite, one of Zeld's technical project specialists and project managers. He is passionate about leveraging technology to drive business growth. Before we begin, there are a couple of quick housekeeping points to cover for any new viewers. If you can't hear anything, please check the audio settings on the bottom left toolbar. Feel free to post questions using the Q&A button. We will save these until the end. However, please feel free to post them as we go, as it may make sense to bring them up during the segment. Once we get to the Q&A section, you can participate by either putting your hand up to ask the question or just posting them for me to read. If you would like to go back to this webinar to share it or to watch previous webinars, we do record all of these and they can be found on our website and YouTube, and we will also send you a link to today's webinar. Before we begin, I hope you enjoyed today's session, and I would now like to invite Logan to take us through today's webinar, Creating Amazing User Experiences for Customers with the Right UX/UI Design. Over to you, Logan.
All right, thank you, Helen. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to share my screen. All right. Creating amazing user experiences with the right UX/UI. This is something that I am super passionate about as a technical project specialist here at Zeld. I manage projects and over a big part of the customer journey, and helping to design and help customers understand what UX/UI is in the context of websites and why it matters. So we'll get into it this morning, and thanks for joining. All right, so we've got here considerations for an existing site, and this also goes for if you have a new site build. So we talk about UX/UI and what does that mean? So UI in the typical context will be the elements on your site, the static components. So we talk about fonts, colors, the padding, the really simple things that we all sort of take for granted, but there's often a lot of thought and consideration that goes into these items. So I'll give you an example in a moment. And then we have user experience, which is how you interact with those components. So you might have, for example, a button or a menu. What happens, when we use these things without any thought, there's an experience that we have, and that's often well thought out and planned. And there's a lot of again, planning and consideration that goes into the way that those things behave. So I'll give you an example of a site when we have these buttons. Okay, so the buttons themselves, we would call that UI, but the way that what happens when we hover over them, so we have a purple bar, it disappears and now it's highlighted blue. So the customer's colors, they have some key color components, and blue is one of them. So you immediately know that when you're hovering over an element, that there is some action that can be taken. Okay, so and also where the buttons are and the padding between the buttons, the font that is used, okay, across the website, you want to make sure there's consistency. Okay, so then again, moving into this image here on the right is a really good example. It's very simple, and there's a button there which is what we call the call to action. So you sort of immediately know what the website is there for and what it's sort of telling your customers to do. We want to create a familiar experience while also trying to be unique. So what I mean by that is we want to back to this website example, it's very common to have these buttons here, which are called call to action. So we need familiarity and we need those call to actions so customers know where to go. Okay. And we can add in other elements and other design pieces to give it a unique look and feel. What we don't want to do is create such a unique experience that when a customer comes to your site that they don't know where to go, because you're trying to create this, this very unique experience. I'll give you an example. It's not an example of a website, but it's an example of a hotel that I stayed at in Hong Kong. It was architecturally designed and they didn't want to have any elements on the doors. So they had no room numbers on the doors, or the room numbers were on the ceiling. So you got to your floor, you went to find your room, and you just had to use your key card to tap on every room because nobody told us that the room numbers were on the ceiling. So you want to create a unique experience, but not so unique that there is no clear path for the customer to follow. Okay. So coming back to the UX, it's really there to help drive business goals and sales conversion, and really just keeping that path obvious. We have a lot of built-in biases, and without even thinking, a lot of the behavior that happens when you go to a website, we don't even think about doing it. We just, we have an automatic response to what we see without even thinking. So we'll get in more into the elements of what UI and UX and what those sort of elements are made up of, and I'll provide some more context as we go along. So statistics is a big part of how we measure the success of UI and UX. With the advent of mobile devices, which is big, adoption has been huge over the last few years. You almost need to have two versions of your sites, and we'll talk about this a bit later on as well. So people interact differently with a desktop and with a mobile. A lot of times there'll be the initial investigation would be done on a mobile, and then there will be conversion happening on the desktop, or it will happen on a mobile. It very much depends on what your site is doing, and if you're in the market of e-commerce, or depending on what imagery you have on the website as well, whether people want to see that. For example, if you're buying a boat or a house, you might be wanting to view that on the desktop so you can view the images and see the detail. Whereas if you're buying a pair of shoes, you might just do that on your mobile in the context of an e-commerce platform. The last point there, mobile has a 42% market share in New Zealand, and that is an average. We typically see numbers as high as 65 to 75% in terms of analytics that we see of customer websites, again, depending on what the website is and what the purpose of the website is, whether it's e-commerce or whether it's sort of just a website for inquiries, what we would call a lead generation. So you really need to be thinking about the devices and how they are being used on your website. So we'll get into this a little bit more. When you're looking at your website and thinking, oh, what could we do differently? What could we change? You really need to think about not just looking at the desktop, but looking at the mobile experience as well. Okay, so we've got some main elements here that we're going to go through and sort of give you a bit more context and why you should think about these things. Okay, so I earlier talked about call to action. So these are sort of key elements that are typically buttons that when a customer lands on your site, we want to give them a clear call to action as to what they need to do next. Okay, chances are the customer lands on your site, they might not even scroll. They might just see the call to actions and just click on it, and therefore they're not going to see any more of the content on your site. So you just really need to be thinking about those buttons and those call to actions that you have at the top of your site to make sure the messaging is succinct. Typically, you just want one word. With this sealed example, we've got how we can help, webinars, e-commerce, and free gem websites. So we're pretty clear call to actions there, and we just need to make sure there's consistency with the button colors as well. So when we're thinking about buttons, and coming back to what I was talking about earlier in the context of UI and the colors that you use, we want that to all be consistent with your theme. So we don't want to be having random colors that are coming into play if we have a hover over effect, again, like we talked about with this Patuki Manawa example. We want to have very, very consistent, and there's very subtle user experience changes here on the buttons. And giving this a bit more context around what examples of what we would recommend in the context of buttons. And this gives a mobile example. So it's very, in this example, it's very clear sort of call to action. You want them to be vivid and contrasting colors, but also tying into your website theme. Don't use random colors that you haven't used anywhere else on the site. Okay. And it stands out from non-interactive elements on your website. So the other thing to be aware of when you have these buttons and these call to actions is you don't want to have too many. You don't want to overwhelm the customer or the end user with too many buttons that look the same. So then it dilutes that conversion pathway. So for example, that on the left, that book a consultation button, if you had 3 buttons that looked exactly the same, but they were all within the same location on this the page view of the site, that could become confusing. Okay, and we've got there an example of the 10mm by 10mm touch target size. Okay, specifically for mobile versions of web pages. So what you want to be thinking of as well, again, is what you have in your desktop version might not work on your mobile. So we really need to be thinking about that, almost having 2 versions of your website when you're thinking about it from a UX and a UI perspective. Okay, navigation menus. All right, so this is again something when we go to a website, this is something that's very, very often taken for granted, and it's something that we just really need to be cognizant of, to keep the messaging again succinct, keep the wording that we use. It needs to be accurate and reflective of what we're trying to portray to the customer. So yeah, this example, we have apply, donate, our stories, news, about us, FAQs. It's all quite familiar wording. And the navigation menu is there to guide users within your website by helping them locate pages where they can find the information they need. And that's kind of it in a nutshell, really. I'll give you an example here of a customer of ours they sell shoes. And we've got here, so we've got indentation as well. Okay, so we've got women and men. We've got very clear indentation that shows you that's a type of product within that sort of main product. Okay, and so drop downs are a really good idea if you want to show that there's more detail. Okay, and you want to have a clear path. Now, the other thing to consider is when you are talking about navigation is what you are doing with your search functionality. This is a massive part of a modern website. So typically we find with e-commerce, there's going to be a lot of times when a customer comes to your site and they already have a pretty good idea of what they want to find. They want to find the search, and then they want to be taken to the page they want to be shown results based on their search criteria. Okay, so always be thinking about where is it obvious to my customers where the search function is? Okay, and this also goes for the mobile view as well. So consistency across both of those experiences. Okay. And again, we have that menu shown again. This ties into the second part of what we're talking about, navigation menus. And that it's simple design that indicates major pages on your website. And again, what I talked about, keeping your text short and descriptive, and consistency. Okay, so consistent throughout your website, that the messaging on your on that top menu bar, the top navigation menu, is consistent. The hoverovers as well. So when we you don't always have to do this, but you can do so differentiating colors as well. So this would be the UI of this website is the text, the font that we've used, and the UX of the website, the user experience, is what happens when I hover over. So it's obvious to me that, you know, I've hovered over these things. Okay, and what you have to remember is when you're on a mobile, this hover over experience isn't there because I don't have a mouse. So these are all sort of things to really take into consideration when you're thinking about the mobile versus desktop. Don't get too hung up on doing a lot of stuff around complex hoverovers if most of your audience is coming from mobile and they won't experience these things, okay? Okay, so then, yeah, we lead into common types of menus. So this is sort of follows on to what I was talking about earlier. So we have the horizontal navigation bar. So this is typically how we're gonna navigate around a traditional desktop site. Okay, and then we have the hamburger menu, which is what I had showed you on the podium example. Okay, so very familiar. Okay, and typically this hamburger menu, I can show you another example here for Patuki, is going to be located top left. So again, this is a little UX piece that we often take for granted, but we typically will have a bias to go to the top left to find the burger menu on a mobile without even thinking. That's where we're going to go. Okay, so just all these little pieces to consider. Okay, so then we continue again with the navigation menu. So we were talking about the top of the page before. So now we move into the bottom of the page and also side navigation as well. So we'll talk about footer navigation first. So footer navigation is basically reinforcing what you have on your top menu, but along the footer of the website. So a good, as an example, we come down to the bottom of Patuki Manawi, we have down the bottom here, we have exactly what is located at the top. Okay, we have a sort of simple call to action for phone number and address. So a good reason why you would use this detail on the footer is if a site, I know for me sometimes if a site is confusing, a good way to, or if a site is unfamiliar, I'll go to the footer and quite often they'll have the detail that I need if it's a simple phone number, if it's not obvious. So it's, you know, it can be a familiar area for people. So it's always good to reproduce that at the bottom of the site as well. Okay, so that's the footer piece. So then we move into the vertical sidebar navigation. So again, this vertical sidebar navigation it doesn't fit all purposes, but there is definitely specific use cases. And we will typically see this as what we call filtering product views. So for this example with Podium, we have an filter here on the left-hand side. Okay, and this enables us to go through and select various different products. Okay. So that would be in the context of an e-commerce site, it's a very good example. Now, what you have to think about as well is that works very well on the desktop site, but if I'm on a mobile, how is it going to look and how is it going to work? And this is when you really get into the UX part, the user experience part of of the design of your site. So, for example, we have the filters. Okay, so they'll pop out from the left. That's fine. What happens when I scroll? So often on websites, when you are looking at a filter system like this, the filters will be at the top, and you keep scrolling, and the filters disappear because they're stuck to the top of the page. So what we've done is we have a scroll, okay, and then we have show filter, and it will follow you down the page, all right? So you never feel lost. It's always there. It pops out from the left-hand side, which is, again, it's a familiar type of navigation, and then you can continue to filter your products, okay? So all just, different things to think about. We don't always have to have those static elements. We can move them with the page. So that's, again, tying in what would typically be a static UI element. We can tie that into the user experience.
Logan, I've just had a question from Vince just regarding the term hamburger menu.
Yes.
And if people, he's used the age bracket over 55s, if they would be aware of the term hamburger menu, or if that's, if there is another term like a top menu or any other kind of terminology that they would be familiar with.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think the hamburger menu, that terminology, has come about because of the it's two buns with the ingredients in the middle, so that's where the hamburger comes from. And I think there is an amount of familiarity. Even if you don't know what it's called, you still have an unconscious bias to go to the top left, hence why it's there. So even though you might not, and you don't need to know what it's called, it's more of a sort of a technical and industry term that we use. But yeah, it could be called the 3 bars, the hamburger, but it's more about the sort of the psychology behind it, of where, if we land on a site, where do we naturally want to go? Okay, and this experience as well is the same on an iPad. So if you are on a tablet device, that experience, if we talk about mobile devices as opposed to desktops, is going to be the same. It's going to be consistent as well. Okay, so I hope that answers your question, Vince. Okay, page scrolling. So yeah, this is a really interesting one, page scrolling. So we have some, a whole bunch of stats that come out, and it really, there's a lot of information out there, and it really, again, depends what you're selling on your website and the information that you want to get across. But what I always, when I'm talking with customers, my recommendation is we always want to get the most important information, the most important messaging. We want to get that across to the customer in sort of the top section. Okay, so if you look at, you need to be thinking about, okay, so this is where I'm going to land on a desktop. What is that going to look like on a mobile? So, because we often forget, this is the most important information that we want to get across, but we often forget that, we might have the desktop design set up in a certain way, and then when they get to the mobile version of your website, these buttons could be completely missing. So you just really need to be thinking about both of those instances. And another key piece is when we're scrolling, what sort of experience do we want the user to have as well? So we have these items, let's come back here, called sticky headers. Okay, so there's a lot of analysis and information out there around what's called sticky headers and their what they can do particularly for an e-commerce There's numbers out there around the helps conversion rates by up to 30% because the user never feels lost. So I could be scrolling down and I feel confident that I can keep scrolling because the sticky header is always there. So I never feel lost. So I see a product or I see something that I'm interested in, I can always go back up here. I'm familiar with these terms now because I've been on the site for about 10 seconds. And, I know that I can always come back and I can get back to the shoes that I was interested in looking at. So just, things to keep in the back of your mind. And again, a massive thing, a user's experience when scrolling on a page is mostly subconscious. That's a huge part. So I like to sort of grab their attention as soon as possible and potentially, get them to move off the page as soon as possible down that conversion pathway.
Logan, I've just got a question on that scrolling. It used to be that in terms of design, that what you see on the homepage should only take up a screen. And now we're saying that visitors to a website are used to scrolling a bit more and going down a page, where that I think used to be quite different a few years ago.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a move to consuming that what we call longer form sort of content. It really depends if on your website, and is it an e-commerce platform? If you do you have articles, blogs? It really depends. And we can do things where you can, so I'll give you this example of our secondhand goods, where we can display the information on essentially one page, but instead of these headings taking you away, we can bounce you to different locations on the site, okay? So we can do things like that. So we could essentially, instead of having 5 pages, we could build out one long page and we give you a clear pathway to get around that longer form page. So really just, it's really going to depend on what is the purpose of your site, whether you're e-commerce or whether you're trying to add value by, you have those articles, or it's really just going to depend on the context of your site. And again, so these call to actions here, you could have these call to actions bounce down to a particular location, but you still need to be thinking about if you're going to take them to a different location on the page, or if they're scrolling, there needs to be a clear reason for them. And if they're going to be scrolling, what are they going to find? Okay. And just further to the page scrolling piece, users tend to scroll when consuming long form content. So what we were talking about, or when scanning a page for a specific piece of information. This comes back to the search as well. I find that I don't want to do a huge amount of scrolling. I want to go to a site, I want to use the search, and then I will filter the information. I will get a return from the search, and then I will filter the information based on the search. I want the website to essentially do the work for me. And then, I'll get into the results based on what the search returns. So we need to, and it's important to follow the web design guidelines to avoid scrolling fatigue or rage quitting. So we really need to be conscious of the content that we're putting on the site. Is it engaging? Is it, if we are sending people to blog posts, is there a conversion pathway from the blog post to, we always need to be thinking about the end goal for these items and where and how we have them displayed on the page. I'll give you an example of this with Patuki Manawa. Again, we have events. Okay, so we have these events here. And so often you'll go into, we would call this a blog style page, and you might have, some detail, but then there's no button. So there's no way for the user to then convert their interest. So we have very clear, buttons to then convert to move the customer to the next stage. And that's what we always need to be thinking about. Okay, and just some more on how to structure when we talk about page scrolling, how to structure the content to make it more sort of consumable and keep people interested. Okay, so segmenting into clusters. So again, the reason why we're talking about segmenting into clusters and on the left-hand side, we're talking about these clusters, these tiles, these blocks. And the reason we look at doing this is because that's easily transferable on into a mobile experience. Okay, so all of these blocks, these tiles that you see here, they will easily get stacked into a mobile view. So for an example, with Patuki Manawa. Okay. So again, these blocks easily become stacked. So you just really need to be thinking about, and again, we've stacked these components that were sort of two to three abreast on the page. So really thinking about those components and the consistency between desktop and mobile, and what that is going to look like when the customer is using multiple devices. Images, massive part. So the simplest thing for images is use, like the points say there, images tell your story. It's a reflection of your brand. Just, if you don't really know what to do, you can always do it yourself, but if you're going to do it yourself, go to YouTube, have a look at some tutorials. And remember, this is a reflection of your brand. I've stayed, like a good example of this is I've stayed in a lot of Airbnbs, particularly when we could travel more. And, it's so often you would choose an Airbnb based on the photos that you saw. And if the photos were poor, then you probably wouldn't stay there. And that's, kind of a really good example, I think, of, if you want to put your best foot forward, you want to show that you're a professional, that you're a professional business, and you want to, particularly if if you're doing product shots, just put the effort in and just do good product shots, because the conversion rate is going to sort of live or die by how people perceive that product, and so much of that comes back to imagery. So, if you're on the fence about it, I'd definitely recommend looking at, getting some professional shots done, with neutral backgrounds as well for product shots in particular. Or if you're going to be using background colors, use colors that are in the same theme as your website. Again, coming back to consistency, familiarity. You want it to be unique at the same time, but you still want to feel like you haven't gone off into the ether when people are clicking on product images. So again, use colors and shades that complement your overall website design, to that consistency that I talked about. And that also comes back to when we talk about hero image. So hero image is the image, all right? That's the sort of the heart and soul of your website. So when you land, you see an image and you're immediately trying to portray to the customer what exactly it is that you do. Okay, so you kind of want to get in the first 3 seconds portray to the end user what exactly the website is about. Okay, through imagery. Okay, so now we're going to move on to a pretty big user experience piece, adding products to carts. So this is the sort of make or break when a customer is transacting on your website. They want to buy a product, adds to the cart. Am I going to have a good experience? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it confusing? And just really, when you're adding to cart, what can we do as to add value? And when I say add value, I mean, can we add something that would be, sorry, one moment. can we add something to the user experience, like a cart upsell? So I can show you an example of and what that means in a moment. And again, using the same colors, shapes, shades, consistency, familiarity of the rest of your website. You don't want it to seem so unfamiliar. Even down to like on the left-hand side example, the colors that are showing there are the greens. So the colors of your fonts is down to the littlest detail. Okay, so I'll take you through here, select size, and I'm a 10, add to cart. All right, so we're going to have a simple pop out from the right-hand side, and then we've also got recommendations. So this is a product upsell feature. So these are lower cost products that you don't need to give too much consideration to, and I can just click add. Yep, I would like some gel packs, and I can just click add to cart, and then I can just go checkout. Okay, and it's a very good seamless experience. And
those additional products that you've just got there, Logan, would they be 3 set products that you would 2 set products that you would choose, or would they alternate depending on what the client has actually put into their cart? For example, if I put women's shoes into my cart, would you have the option to maybe select women's socks, or would that just be generic?
Yeah, normally it really depends, but normally we'll have 3 generic products that require no additional thinking or selection criteria. If you get into socks or anything else that requires it, so if you get into socks, you'll typically need to pick a size. So what we want to do is we want to create what's called as the least amount of friction possible. Okay, so see a gel pack. Okay, you can kind of tell the flavoring, or we can add flavors or more detail there, but I just want to make it as easy and as seamless as possible without having to make, at this point I don't want to have another decision to make.
But more of an impulse.
Yep, more of an impulse. So it's definitely a really good thing to think about what you can do around. Think about as the supermarket, the candy bars at the checkout. It's essentially the same premise.
I think that works well as well if sites have free shipping over $100, and you know that your order is at $90, and there's something for $10 just in that cart.
Absolutely.
And you think, oh, I'll just spend another $10 and get my free shipping.
Yeah, that's a really good example. Okay, and then from the cart, we've already kind of gone through this for the checkout as well. And again, that's the upsells and the cross sells. Really like to do the quite often the upsells before you actually get to, really think about doing the upsells before you get to the cart, because quite often it's once they get to the cart, it's a bit harder to do that conversion of the additional products we find. So yeah, easy, straightforward, organized. So making it as clear as possible. Do I want to change a quantity? How can I change the quantity of the product? Allow guest checkout. Yep, that's a big thing. You don't always want to be wanting the customer to have to create an account. Encourage upsells, cross sells. Talk about that. Maintain transparency. Shipping tax. Yep, that's really big, particularly if you are going to do international shipping. You really need to think about that, and really think about with the shipping piece as well. Are you doing integrated shipping models? We're seeing more and more charges coming through now with couriers, particularly in urban centres. So there's almost 3 pricing models. There's a courier just for normal suburban deliveries. There's a courier for urban, so CBDs, and there's the RD charges as well. So you really want to just think about that and capture it. And depending on what you want to do with shipping, do you want to absorb that, or do you want to pass that on to your customer? So we can do some really cool stuff around integration. So it can essentially look up their postcode or we can use other methods to make that as accurate as possible to pass on that shipping cost. Okay, highlight available payment options. So we've got things coming, we've got things in now like lay by and pay later and all of those, you know, other pieces that enable people to pay in a different way. So just thinking about that as well for your sites to have those options clearly outlined, so you can essentially convert as many people as possible. For example, on this site, you know, lay-by is a big part of what they do, and on the website in the footer we have it clearly stated as well, the payment options. Okay. Measuring success. Okay, so this is a big part. So we have a site, it's launched. Aside from the, you know, if we talk about it purely from an e-commerce point of view to start with, we're going to have, you're going to be able to see some success just purely through the dollars that are coming through. But the next piece is the site's been live for a few months, so you have an existing site. What can we do to make it better? Okay, so we can do what's called heat mapping, usability testing, so we can essentially track the user's mouse and or if they're on a mobile, we can track where they're clicking. Sorry, not clicking, but where they're tapping. So we can track that sort of information and get some really good feedback as to what's working. So, for example, these buttons that are back on the homepage, these might not be working. So we need to think about, you know, do we change the wording? Do we change the coloring? Basically, that age-old analogy, you can't improve what you don't measure. So this is a big part of it as well. And then, yeah, feedback forms and surveys. So that's more of a customer engagement piece. And what you would typically do to get that feedback is you would be doing some sort of dangling of the carrot. So you'd say, you know, we can give you a coupon code, or, you know, get a free $10 voucher. There has to be some sort of, if you're going to go down that path of feedback forms and surveys, it needs to be an incentivized, piece. Okay. So again, as part of the measurement piece, we use analytics to check bounce rate. So bounce rate being if a customer gets to your site and within 5 seconds they've left, we need to figure out why. So, you know, we need to be having a look at those analytics, and we can do that through Google has a very good tool. We can embed some pieces of code on the page to easily see that and provide feedback. And it's sort of a constant, it's always an iterative process to be constantly working on the website and making it as good as it can possibly be. Okay, and then as part of the analytics, we can actually set up goals as well. So we can, if we have sign up to an email address list, or you have a downloadable, a free downloadable PDF, for example, we can tie the what's called the goals. So we can tie a piece of code to a button. So when a user clicks on it or taps on it, we can see, essentially how many people are tapping on that to download that PDF to see what the interest is. You know, you might see the interest is really good, so you could look at creating some more of those, some more of that downloadable content. Okay, and then we can set times for measuring the design's effectiveness. So again, it's an iterative process. So checking on your website every sort of few months to see if what we have implemented is doing what it needs to do. And look, it's never perfect. It's a constant, you know, iterative cycle. And I always recommend to go back and revisit sort of every 6 months and see see how things are going. Again, you can't improve what you don't measure. So it's really good to get that information. So that's it from me today. Did anybody have any other questions?
Sorry about that. I still had my my mute on. Thanks for that, Logan. You provide many takeaways for our attendees to consider. The customer journey from the moment a visitor lands on your site right through to the checkout process, theming a website to keep it fluid and coherent, and gathering consumer data to drive educated decisions for refinement of your website for the best customer experience. I'm sure that you all found Logan's presentation useful and picked up some valuable tips. Logan, do you just want to stop sharing your screen for me for a moment? Cool. Yep. So, Logan, are there any best colours or themes to actually use on a website that are restful or that are more interactive?
Yeah, so it's really, it's quite an individual, that's quite an individual decision or an individual consideration, depending on, again, it needs to tie in. You might have fonts that you like, but if it's not coherent and, you know, cohesive with your brand, then I absolutely wouldn't go down that path. So look, it's very much an individual, and you know, you can have an amount of uniqueness about it, but it still needs to be tied into the consistent theming of your brand, essentially. So same clean fonts and colors that are appropriate.
Okay, not too much of the cursive flowery stuff, perhaps.
Yeah, and don't ever use fonts that like calligraphy or something that you can't even understand. So yeah.
Cool. Now, what about static versus video images on a page? Is there any preference, or are there certain times where one would be preferable over another?
You look, absolutely. I'm a big fan of using video on a landing homepage, depending on what the purpose of your site is. The reason I like videos so much is it gives you the ability to, you know, tell a story in a very quick, short space of time. So you might have a 10-second clip, and you know, you can land on that page, and you really get a sense of what the site, you know, is about, and it's engaging as well. So definitely, you know, think about how you could use video as opposed to static imagery. Yes.
Nice, thank you. Now, what say I really like my homepage design of my website, but when it's been optimized for mobile or tablet, the design is kind of lost and I'm not happy with what they've actually done. What should you do there?
Yeah, absolutely. So we really need to, you need to have a look at it with, you know, don't just think of the mobile as the sort of poorer cousin in the equation. And a lot of senses these days, the mobile is going to come first and the desktop is, you know, kind of secondary. So you just really need to, you know, get in touch with someone who can sort of look at it as, you know, a separate piece. And really there needs to be consistency between the two platforms. But yeah, absolutely, you need to if you have concerns about that, and chances are it's hurting your conversion pathways. So yeah, get in touch and we can definitely help you out.
So as a designer, that's one of the things that you look at in tandem, how it looks like on the website and how it looks like on a mobile. So
absolutely
equally important, and as you say, not one is poorer cousin to the other.
Yeah.
Thank you. So let's recap what Logan has covered today. What we know: UI, or user interface, controls how a visitor uses your site. UE, or the user experience, is about how a visitor feels when on your site. Opportunity. UX design helps drive business goals such as sales or conversions. Prediction. There is an ever-increasing psychology in how visitors browse a site and what refinements can be made to utilize that information. And our recommendation. Measure the success of the UX UI design of your website by asking your customers for feedback, or observe how they behave online through the tools Logan recommended. Spend time reviewing and refining your customers' experience. Xeld has helped over 15,000 businesses transform digitally over the last 20 years. If you would like support setting up marketing automation, or even getting an idea around potential digital strategy for your business, then please get in touch with us. We provide free strategy or website audit sessions with our team of experienced digital business strategists. If you would like a strategy session, please provide this feedback in the survey after the webinar. Our GEM initiative is available to all small to medium businesses who need to get online. We're offering free website builds for e-commerce, service and charity businesses with a no sale, no fee hosting arrangement for the first 12 months. If you'd like to know more or know someone who could benefit from a free website build, please visit our website zeald.com for more information. Our next webinar is on the 2nd of June at 10 a.m. The topic is effective digital tactics to get more results for your business with one of our well-known digital business strategists, Jara Borman. A special thanks to our presenter today, Logan. We appreciate your valuable insights and extensive knowledge. If anyone has missed out on part of the webinar or would like to see it again, we will be posting a video of this webinar on our YouTube channel. If you know of anyone that might benefit from attending these in the future, please feel free to share the link to register. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we look forward to seeing you next week.